Hello, good evening. Thanks for coming to tonight's meeting on the 2023 capital budget. We're going to talk specifically about some community and economic development projects. We have some great panelists here to answer any questions you may have about those topics. And we'll also talk about the development of the budget overall. More specifically, we're going to go through the actual process of how the budget's built, what's inside the capital budget generally. And then we're going to get to dive into some really cool topics. We're going to see presentations from some really crucial departments that really shape the landscape literally and figuratively of your neighborhood. So we're going to hear from the Community Development Division within the Office of Management and Budget. We're also going to hear from the Department of Permits, Licenses, and Inspections, who do some really crucial work. City planning kind of sets the table for a lot of what happens within our city boundaries. And the Urban Redevelopment Authority has a huge role in what happens in your neighborhoods too. After those presentations, we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers. You can also type out any questions you have during the slides in the chat. There's a couple dozen experts ready to answer your question on the line tonight. So if you have anything, you can type it in there, or you can come off mute later on when we have that session and ask your question. So before we get too far along, I did see the accessibility request from Mr. Love. We'll be getting to you. We'll unmute you at the start of the question and answer so you can pose any questions you have. If anybody else has any accessibility concerns, feel free to put those in the chat. To my teammates, I unfortunately can't see the chat very easily. So if anything comes up that I should pause for, please feel free to come off mute and let me know. So to start, we just want to talk about what the definition of a capital project is and how some of these projects fit in there, how they're a little bit different. There's kind of three core rules to what makes a capital project and what ends up in the capital budget. It's designing, building, restoring, or maintaining, retaining or purchasing a city-owned asset. A lot of our maintenance is actually in the operating budget. It's also for bigger things. It's not just purchasing, a saw. It's purchasing something that's worth at least $50,000. So really large vehicles, buildings, parks, things like that of great value. We also want to make sure that we're investing in our longer term assets. So things usually with a useful life of 5 years or more. In terms of what's in the other budget, the operating budget, there's some really important things in there too. So within the operating budget, there's a lot of day-to-day expenses, a lot of employee expenses like salaries, pensions, healthcare, other benefits like that. Some of the day-to-day supplies like our office supplies or employee uniforms come out of the operating budget. We also pay for our utilities. In the capital world, we put up lights and ball fields, but those bills actually get paid each month through the operating budget. And then again, any of our small equipment that maybe our Department of Public Works staff may use out in the field, that's usually covered by the operating budget. The capital budget deals a lot with the built environment. It's things out that you can feel and touch and utilize, bridges, ball fields, parks, pools, playgrounds, all those kind of big physical assets. But we also house a lot of really important HUD programs in there too. Our community development block grant funds come down through HUD, along with 3 to 4 other large grant programs. We want to make sure that those are all in one place for continuity. So those all reside in the capital budget. And we're going to talk about a lot of those programs tonight, actually. There is a little bit of uniqueness to what goes on between the capital budget and the operating budget when it comes to community and economic development projects. As you can see, again, there's a divide between the two budgets in regards to what they're usually paying for in terms of day-to-day. But also there are some things within the capital budget that are help funding positions in the operating budget. So we're able to use a portion of our community development block grant funds to pay for staff salaries to administer that program. So those staff positions are listed in the operating budget, but they're technically paid for out of the capital budget. So another way to visualize that is that there's kind of an interchange between the two budgets. So in the same way that we use bond funds to pay for our large capital assets, the debt for those bond funds actually gets paid for in the operating budget. Similarly, down at the bottom of the graph, you can see that within our larger grants program for the capital budget, we have those HUD grants and they can be utilized to pay for some staff within the operating budget. So keep everybody on our toes. We're going to have a quick capital quiz. Alex, if you want to load that up for us, that would be great. So the first question in the poll is, all of the following are CDBG eligible activities except A, public services and activities for Pittsburgh residents, B, maintenance of public office buildings. C, housing development undertaken by community-based organizations. D, prevention of remediation of blight. So you got 4 options. There's going to be 3. So hopefully you can go 3 for 3. We had some pretty smart residents in the mobility meeting last week that actually got all 3, but I want to see good participation. Everybody should be able to click on a button and take a guess on this one. So Alex, do you want to show the results? Oh, this is interesting. Actually, most people, I'll say the answer that was most often selected was correct. B is the one that we actually shouldn't be using community development block grants on. Maintenance of public office buildings is something that we should be taking care of with our existing funds. We may hear more about this from Wendy Finstrom in a little bit, but community development block grant funds are really intended to be over and above. We want to use those funds to add new services, new infrastructure for residents, to help residents with low and moderate incomes have better neighborhoods and better opportunities. With the capital budget, it's important to keep in mind that a lot of what we're working on are kind of larger projects that can take multiple years, multiple phases, many millions of dollars to complete. So for a standard capital project, this is actually an excerpt from a 2022 proposal from the Department of Public Works for the Southside Park project. There's actually 3 phases of money being requested here for a construction phase, another design phase, and a second construction phase in 2024. So when we're doing planning for the capital budget, even though we are only legislating the next year, 2022 is all we're legally doing when we pass a budget, our office still does planning for another 5 years out, this 2023 to 2027 region, to make sure that we're accounting for those later year phases. One of the interesting things with a lot of the projects we're going to talk about tonight is that many of them are kind of single phase projects that have high volume, high demand, recurring each year. So for example, right now we're looking at an excerpt of the capital budget showing the remediation of condemned buildings page that permits, licenses, and inspections overseas. A lot of what they're able to do is single phase. They can take down a building in 1 year, but we know that this is going to be a recurring issue. I would love to solve the problem in 1 year, but unfortunately we can't. We have to work with the resources we have. So even though we're legislating 2022 for PLI in that budget, we still want to account for future year demand that's responsible to the needs of the residents. So we want to have placeholder amounts in those outer year phases, in those outer years, to make sure that we can do similar levels of service for residents through the next 5 years. So when we're talking about the capital improvement plan or the CIP, what that actually is just kind of all of those individual project outer year phases stacked on top of each other. We use those needs to help develop our debt strategies, to help figure out what our PAYGO transfer should be each year and how to go out for different different grants. In terms of checking out the capital budget, you may have specific interests that you want to look into. There's a bunch of really excellent appendices at the end of each budget. This one is on page 161 of the 2022 capital budget. This chart I reference quite a bit. It's the 2022 projects by department. It's a matrix table that shows a list of the projects, both by the department, but also by the funding. So if you wanted to look at what did the city of Pittsburgh budget for community development block grants in 2022, you can check out this appendix and in 2 pages get a sense of everything that we budgeted those funds for. You can also look up your favorite department, maybe it's the URA in this case, and check out all the programs that we funded with this budget year as well. So we're on to quiz number 2. Alex, if you want to bring that poll up. The question is, how much capital money, which includes community development block grants, pay-as-you-go or PAYGO funds, American Rescue Plan funds or ARP funds, did the city spend on demolition in 2021? So how much money did we give the Department of Permits, Licenses, and Inspections to remediate condemned buildings in the city of Pittsburgh for 2021? So the options are A, 500,000 to just under $1 million, B, 1 million to just under 2 million, C is 2 million to almost 3 million, and D is 3 million to almost 4 million. So how much money in total do you think that we gave the Department of Permits, Licenses, and Inspections to do remediation? It's really important. I think one of the excellent things about this group of panelists is that If you think of how property can change over from blighted into redeveloped, all those parties are kind of represented tonight. So if you have questions about that life cycle, this is the right group to talk to. Alex, do you want to show us what the results were? Very good. Brendan, I actually forget the answer to this one. What is the correct answer?
3.4 million. It's letter D.
Letter D. About 30, you got that right. Good job. So in terms of the process for the capital budget, we are kind of in the thick of it right now. In April, the mayor sets out a series of priorities, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, that outlines what the mayor wants to see from the department directors in terms of their requests. They are values that the department directors can think about. They can review their own project lists and figure out which projects fit into those priorities. In May, our office, the Office of Management and Budget, issues a request for proposals. You saw the excerpt of that form a little bit ago. It's a 2-pager. We're going to go into some of the details of that in a few slides. And then in May and June are the really crucial months for us. That's when we go out to the public and ask for your input. We do that a few different ways. We've actually been going to community meetings throughout the month of May to drop in with the Sheridan Community Council, for example, and give them a presentation on both the operating and capital budget. We ask their opinion in those meetings, get a sense of what's important to them. We also hold 3 public meetings. So we had the mobility meeting last week. We have tonight's meeting on economic development and community projects. Please come back tomorrow. We're going to have another meeting with the Department of Public Works and City Parks on recreation projects. And then we also utilize a survey on our Engage PGH page to solicit your input. We're going to talk about that survey towards the end of the meeting. So you have opportunities to let us know what your feedback is for the 2023 budget. In July, we receive all the proposals. They are due July 1st. Throughout the months of July, August, and into September sometimes, we meet with the departments and figure out what is not on the page. What questions can we ask about the proposal that'll help us understand how best to score them? Throughout that month, the Capital Program Facilitation Committee, or those 2 months, are reviewing and scoring proposals to make formal recommendations to the mayor in September. So that's when the Capital Program Facilitation Committee, which is made up of members of the Office of Management and Budget from the mayor's office, the City Council Budget Office, and the Controller's Office. Those 3 parties, we get together and score proposals, compile them all into a formal report that goes to the mayor as formal recommendations in September. Also in September, a few weeks later, the mayor proposes a preliminary budget. That is a great way to kind of express where we are in terms of a draft for the 2023 budget. Between that and the mayor's November budget, there's some great opportunities for input we'll talk about. But the second Tuesday in November, the mayor does a State of the City address and formally releases both the capital and operating budgets. So those are out into the world formally. Throughout the month of December, City Council has the opportunity to do public hearings with the departments, to ask questions about the proposals, to figure out what the direction should be, and also do some of their own changes. So they have the opportunity to vote on amendments to the budget. They have to pass through a majority of council, and then council also votes on the amended version of the budget with all their amendments in it in December. The budgets are, we're on a calendar year for our economic year, so everything is effective January 1st, or at least by January 1st of the next year. So in terms of the mayor's priorities, you have a great opportunity on our Engage PGH page to really dive into them. I think the mayor was extremely thoughtful this year in terms of breaking them into 3 larger ideas that allow people to understand what the vision is for this administration. So on the Engage PGH page, you can read about each one of them in detail. You can also provide feedback on how they rate to you on a scale of importance, so they get that feedback for consideration with next year's priorities as well. So as promised, this is the capital budget proposal form. This is the first page. We ask for the information we need to make right decisions on that outer year phasing I was discussing earlier. So we'll ask departments for each of the next 5 years, basically 6 years, what do you want money-wise? What flavor of money can you use for your project? And they can also let us know if there's a specific phase attached to that money. Additionally, we ask some really important questions that help us understand where the project fits into the city overall. So the first is we ask for a project description, which is just kind of a plain language explanation of what the project is. We also ask for the project justification. This is a great place for department directors, city council offices to write in what the impact of this project is going to be for the communities that they're serving. And then lastly, we ask for the operating budget impact. That's where we want to understand, if you're asking for 2 backhoes, do you need 4 more staff members in the operating budget to be able to utilize those backhoes? Those are questions we can ask to get the balance right between the capital and operating. We want to make sure that we have the staff to actually do the projects that we're budgeting, and vice versa, that the staff that we're hiring has the right tools to be able to do their jobs. In terms of evaluating the capital budget proposals, I talked a little bit earlier about the Capital Program Facilitation Committee. Just as a reminder, it's a larger committee with a smaller scoring committee that's got membership from the Mayor's Office of Management and Budget, the City Council Budget Office, and the Controller's Office. We actually score according to some guidelines in Chapter 218 of City Code. Our process is codified that way. This is the old version of the code, so we were actually asking on each proposal form for people to respond directly to those scoring prompts. So explain to us how this project achieves compliance with a federal or state mandate, for example. Earlier this year, we updated the Chapter 218 code to reflect some new values. In a lot of cases, we just kind of reworded things to be more consistent, but there are 2 important changes in yellow. So the first one is we added a new scoring criteria. Project has clear plan for execution, including site control, project timeline, procurement strategy, and professional cost estimate. That is something that we found to be really crucial, especially with our larger construction projects. We want to make sure that the project is as shovel ready or design ready as possible. And then we also updated one of the other scoring criteria from previously ability to improve quality of life in all city neighborhoods to project improves quality of life for city residents with low and moderate incomes. This is really crucial. While we have the community development block grant funds, they're not enough. We need to supplement those funds with our own city dollars to make sure that we're giving residents with low and moderate incomes a leg up and a chance to really prosper in the city. Whitney Finstrom in just a little bit is going to show you a slide that shows the real kind of effective buying power of our dollars with inflation from that program, and it's gone down over time. So I think when you see that yellow line graph, you'll understand why it's so crucial that we added that. We're going to do one more capital quiz before we pass to Whitney. So this question is, how many properties located within the city of Pittsburgh are also owned by the city? Option A is 2,006. Option B is 1,591. Option C is 3,280. Option D is 887. Brendan, unfortunately, I have to ask you to come up mute again and get the right answer. My notes are on another screen right now. But I think it's interesting to be able to look at a lot of the GIS tools or the, I'm going to get that wrong, the mapping tools we have. I'm sure Andrew can provide the right word for that one. But some of the mapping tools that city planning has on the city website are really interesting. There's opportunities to go in there and check out if your neighborhood is a community development block grant area benefit area. You can check out a lot of interactive maps in regards to your council district. If you're unsure who your council member is, there's some really cool stuff in the digital map room. So Alex, do you mind to show us the results? Brendan, what is the right answer?
Actually A in this case.
2006, pretty decent number. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a second to switch over screens.
Thanks, Dave, and thanks for the opportunity to give you an overview about the program and some of the great things going on in community development. As you see, we're within the Office of Management and Budget, the Community Development Division. So we're responsible for the administration of the city's federal housing and urban development funds. And that includes 4 primary programs. The biggest one is the Community Development Block Grant Fund, or CDBG. And a lot of people think of us as CDBG, right? But there actually are a number of other programs and activities that we work with. And that includes the Emergency Solutions Grant Program, or ESG, the Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS program, or HOPWA, Home Investment Partnerships Program, or HOME program, which is primarily with the URA and the affordable housing programs. And then in addition, I noted that we worked on the COVID-19 response with funds for CDBG, ESG, and HOPWA. and that's just called CV or coronavirus funds. So there were additional funds that were provided in those buckets for those programs, not for the home program, but for the other three. So the funds are used to address the housing, economic, and human service needs of low to moderate income city of Pittsburgh residents and neighborhoods. And each of those programs have different requirements and standards that are set by HUD. We march according to the tune of the HUD guidelines. And for each of these programs, there are slightly different nuanced guidelines and program requirements that we try to meet. So we try to juggle those programs. Yeah, as Dave mentioned, and as you can see, there's been a really fairly dramatic drop in the CDBG funds. Now, these are accounting for inflation, right? So CDBG allocation and real dollars. You can see towards the end there was a bump up. Those are the coronavirus funds that gave us a boost, right, during that period of time. But then we've kind of gone back down. And actually, we've recently received notice that our CDBG allocation is going to be $500,000 less than it was last year, right? So it seems like the trend is continuing to, should I say, flatline, roughly the same as it's been since probably about 2011, except for last year during coronavirus. So we saw a bump up, and then it's kind of continuing to hover around $13 to $14 million. But a great decrease, of course, from the late 70s and even the early 80s. And it's just kind of tilted downwards. Just to dive into some of the really, I've been into the weeds a little bit within the CDBG funds. They have to meet at least one of three national objectives. These are really our guiding regulations around the program. They have to benefit low to moderate income persons, or what we call LMI persons. That's the primary category we work with. The second is it has to aid in the prevention or elimination of slums and blight. And then it has to meet a particular urgent need or urgency. And that's rarely used. It's for like Hurricane Katrina or some natural disaster. That's what that category is really for. Most of the funds are under the benefit to low and moderate income persons. So we in this office, when we get a request for funding, the first question we ask ourselves is, who benefits? What's the core benefit? And it's supposed to be low to moderate income persons, right? 0 to 80%. So that's really the first key question we ask. And I'm not going to go into all those areas, but area benefit would be like a neighborhood park, right? So you could have a millionaire go to that park, but if it's in a neighborhood that's low income, and we can prove that, right, through census information, then that park would probably qualify as an area benefit. Most of the funding we provide is through a limited clientele, right, particularly for public services. So that's a case where the person has to show that they are eligible based on their income. All things HUD, CDBG produces income limits. We get these annually. This is a little late, actually. These are from last year, June of 2021. We should be getting new numbers fairly soon. They're late this year. But anyway, these are the income limits we're currently using. Again, they're probably going to change soon by household income size. And then you can see 30, 50, and then 80 by household size. And these are the guidelines that we use in terms of determining income limits. And on the next slide.
Sorry, yeah, I just wanted to pause. I think it's important to call out that to be a single person in the city of Pittsburgh and make $47,500 or less, you qualify for community development block grants as a client of a lot of our public services. So I think for a lot of us, that's a huge part of our social circle. That could be our neighbors. I was talking to the staff, sick of hearing it, but obviously this is people on the bus, this is people we walk by on the sidewalk all the time, people we may interact with through our jobs. So it's just important to keep in mind what that actual number is for Pittsburgh and how many people really qualify under that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Dave. And be interesting to see what the numbers are when they come out again, hopefully this month, maybe next month, the impact of inflation and all that. So anyway, thanks. Yep. So just to touch on some of the CDBG eligible activities, They can only be used for activities that fall under an authorized category of basic eligibility, right? So again, these are per HUD guidelines. Congress developed these guidelines. So examples include public services to low and moderate income residents, disabled adults and or seniors, rehab or construction of a public facility serving a CDBG eligible neighborhood or clientele. So that could be, neighborhood recreation center, housing related activities, economic development activities, like some portions of the avenues of hope. Funds are also used to make improvements and to construct public facilities. Yeah, complete streets, right? That's a key part. Recreation centers, as I mentioned, and parks and playgrounds. That's a key part. So those are all eligible activities. The public service program, which most folks, I still hear people say ULO, unspecified local option, but we've tried to rebrand it and just simply call it public services. And this allows for the use of public service grants for a wide range of public service activities. And you can see quite a long list, employment services, crime prevention and public safety, childcare, health services, substance abuse services, fair housing counseling, education programs, energy conservation, services for senior citizens, services for homeless persons, welfare services, excluding income payments, down payment assistance and recreational services. So, there's really a long list of eligible activities. But as they say, the details, though, within each of these categories can be a little bit challenging. We have to make sure folks who use these programs are eligible, right? That they are low mod income persons. And there are just all kinds of nuances to each of these categories that we have to kind of work through. Like services for senior citizens, oftentimes we have to make sure that folks meet a certain age. It's not 55 plus, it's 62 plus. Anyway, all kinds of guidelines that we have to follow. Next. So I just wanted to highlight some of the enhanced public outreach efforts. I transposed the words there that we've done this last year. But anyway, we use the Engage PGH site, which was a great platform to get the word out about some of the public needs hearings we had going on. This is an example flyer that we put on the website, and we had a QR code for the survey that we had put out. And anyway, it was a nice platform to put all the information in one location. And we also had the application for public services on Engage PGH site as well. And also videos of the Thanks City channel of the public needs hearings that we could put on there, via YouTube onto the Engage PGH site. So anyway, we're trying to enhance that and build our outreach efforts. And we did hire a public a firm that assisting us with public outreach and engagement. So this was the first time, and they're going to be working with us over the next couple of years. So we're excited to continue to grow that. The other thing I just wanted to put out is that we are in the thick of developing a CDBG video, public service video that we're excited to put together to highlight some of the great work that groups are doing throughout the city. So that'll be fun to work on for everyone. And it'll be fun, hopefully next year, to show you, everyone. Visuals speak louder than words, right? So everyone can be able to see some of the great work that's going on, at least in 5 sections of the city, 5 organizations. So that's in the works. So the other program too, that it used to be called ACBO, we also have changed that to Neighborhood Economic Development. It was formerly Advisory Committee on Community-Based Organizations. So we tried to make it a little simpler. But anyway, this is focused traditionally on on community development organizations that do residential or commercial real estate development or facilitate such development. In 2022, there's a $500,000 allocation. We have some exciting stuff going on there. We're trying to encourage smaller organizations also to, there's a capacity building grant that's been built into the program. So, we're trying to address equity and to make sure that organizations that aren't just the traditional large organizations have an opportunity to participate in the NED program. The other program I just wanted to point out that we've been heavily engaged in, particularly Dave and other folks, is the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, or ERAP. And this is actually not a HUD program. This is through the Treasury Department. And it was a lot to coordinate between the city, the county, and Action Housing. They were our primary organization we work with. And as you see, it provides rent and utility payments for households struggling as a result of the pandemic. The program's winding down more or less, not to go into all the details. The application is closed now, but we worked with the county and others to develop the online tool. And we also really heavily pushed making sure that areas of the city that have not been served in the past had folks who could work with community residents and organizations to make sure they were engaged. So anyway, so as you see, it's assisted households that have at least one person who qualifies for unemployment, has lost income, or impacted by COVID-19, are at risk of experiencing homelessness, they don't get help, and are below 80% of the area median income of the Pittsburgh MSA. And the city ERAP allocation, we had 2 allocations, totaled roughly $16 million. And served over, I don't have the exact number on it, I was trying to get a hold of that, but the system's down. But let's just say at least 1,000 households, primarily single mothers with kids. So, it's really had a tremendous positive impact on the city. So I want to point
Yeah,
out.
that was an unprecedented program in terms of size and speed, and a lot of things the federal government did kind of for the first time. And it had a huge impact, is what he said, really helped a lot of people. So thank you very much, Whitney. Yeah, before we pass to permits, licenses, and inspections, I'll just say outreach is never ending, ongoing, continual. We always look for new opportunities to reach out to people. So if you have an idea, we'll take it. Feel free to type it in the Q&A, or we'll give you an email address later on that you can send any of your outreach ideas to. We'd love to hear. But with that, I'm going to pass to Director Sarah Kinter from Department of Permits, Licenses, and Inspections.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sarah Kinter, Director of the Department of Permits, Licenses, and Inspections for the city. The mission of PLI is to improve and ensure the quality and health of the built environment in Pittsburgh. We're empowered to carry out that mission through the enforcement of the city's building, zoning, and licensing codes. And our mission relies on having robust permitting operations so that construction in the city meets construction code requirements, and robust code enforcement operations to issue citations and gain compliance for structures that do not meet minimum safety requirements. There are over 1,800 known condemned properties in the city of Pittsburgh currently. Here you can see spatially where those condemned properties are located. It's important to note that there are several factors that can result in condemnation of a property. Condemnation means that there are conditions that make the structure unfit for human occupancy under the adopted property maintenance code. It can be for something like not having water service, or something as severe as a catastrophic fire. PLI's small but mighty team of vacant property inspectors are dedicated to reviewing condemned structures and are empowered to designate a building as condemned if it is unfit for human occupancy under the property maintenance code. There are 2 ways to resolve condemnation of a structure. One is to obtain permits to repair the structure, and the other is to obtain permits to demolish the structure. City-funded demolition of condemned properties is reserved for structures that are emergencies or the worst, most dangerous condition citywide. So given the volume of condemned structures and the need for demolition and limited resources that you just heard from Whitney, how do we determine what gets demolished? We score them. We score condemned buildings. So PLI strives to annually inspect identified condemned structures. At the time of inspection, our vacant property inspector performs what we call a programmatic inspection to adequately track conditions of condemned properties over time, in addition to our standard code enforcement process. The scoring system allows us to continually assess condemned structures in the city and appropriately anticipate the need and the costs for annual demolitions. The scores are based on structural factors, including major and minor damage of key elements of the building, and additional conditions that we need to flag, including the structure's proximity or likelihood to affect the right-of-way, or proximity or likelihood to affect occupied adjacent structures. And the score ranges from 1 to 60. It's important to note that the structural scores are also based on what the inspector can see from the right-of-way visibly. So that score does not include interior elements. Also like to note that over 80% of condemned buildings are privately owned. And when the city performs a demolition, we do not gain ownership of that parcel. It remains privately owned. So after scoring these structures for a period of time, here's the distribution of scores that PLI inspectors have recorded of condemned property. On the x-axis here is the actual property score determined by the inspector at the time of the inspection, and the y-axis is the distribution of the score. On average, condemned buildings have a structural score of 15, which indicates that they're not imminently dangerous, and they are, on average, not ready to collapse. There's potential for redevelopment there, perhaps. At PLI, we're concerned with those properties that are scoring higher than 31. Those are in the red, and to us, those are the ones that we need to keep our eye on, and we add to the long-term demolition list. In addition to the structural scores, we've worked with the Department of City Planning to launch an Engage PGH page where we gather formal input from the community on requests for demolition of condemned structures. The Engage PGH page was launched in July of 2021, and we use that page to display our data, show our work, be transparent about what we have listed as the worst building structurally through their score. While PLI's focus is on the structural health of the building, we recognize that there are other factors that can make condemned buildings a nuisance to its neighbors, from pests to rodent problems to break-ins and fires, and we want to take those into account too and allow for additional input. So we've used the feedback from this page to add properties to our CDBG demolition request list. PLI has 2 capital budget funding streams to complete demolitions, which create 2 demolition processes for condemned buildings. For emergency demolitions, PLI is usually called out on a 911 from emergency call services. From there, PLI staff determine whether the structure is imminently dangerous, and then that's going to cause damage or harm to life or property, meaning that's the meaning of eminently dangerous. And if so, we perform what we call a curbside bid with pre-qualified demolition contractors to demolish the structure and make the area safe immediately. For those emergency instances, we treat the structure as if it has asbestos material as well, whether it's residential or commercial. The CDBG demolition process is a longer process. PLI obtains an asbestos survey on prospective properties that we want to demolish first, again, targeting the highest scoring properties. And then we work with our Office of Management and Budget to go through a HUD review, an environmental state review, prior to opening up the bid process for demolition. So it's a longer timeline that sometimes takes months before we're able to demolish. We've identified over 50 structures that we'd like to demolish with the 2021 CDBG funds that were allotted to us. We're waiting for final approval so that these can be completed in summer and fall of 2022. PAYGO funds are more liquid. It's the city's own funds, so they have less restrictions than CDBG capital funds. So a lot of questions we get are around when can we demolish? And so it's helpful in these forums to sort of call out the difference in those processes just based on the funding stream. From 2016 to 2019, PLI was traditionally provided more PAYGO funds than CDBG dollars, allowing us to take more immediate action on demolition. Since 2020, PLI received less PAYGO dollars and received significantly more CDBG dollars. So PAYGO is reserved for fast action that we need to take in case of emergency. You heard in the quiz that PLI was provided $3.4 million in demolition funds in 2021. 2.9 million of that funding is CDBG funding. So we're winding through that approval process. With that, here's a spatial view of where 41 emergency demolitions have occurred in the last year from June 2021 through May 2022. Again, these demolitions would have largely been triggered from a 911 call out. PLI would go out, assess the danger. If eminently dangerous, we'd work with our on-contract contractors to perform an emergency demolition. And here's where 24 non-emergency demolitions occurred with 2020 CDBG dollars for the same reporting period. And we expect to complete an additional 30 non-emergency demolitions for the remainder of the year with remaining 2020 and 2021 CDBG dollars. Here are some before and after photos of city-funded demolitions performed in the last year. I think it's helpful to give some examples of the state of some of the structures that are demolished by the city, by PLI. Okay. Lastly, I wanted to note that we have two city-funded demolition policy initiatives that we launched in the last year. First, City Council passed legislation in November 2021 requiring the department to adopt lead-safe demolition practices to ensure that dangerous lead dust doesn't contaminate our air quality, soil, and water. Majority of structures in the city of Pittsburgh were built prior to 1978, and most of the structures that we demolish are also older than 1978 and contain lead-based paint. Lead hazards can pose serious health risks, especially to young children. So we've worked with OMB procurement team in the last several months to update our demolition contracts to include lead-safe demolition protocols and require that contractors that work for the city obtain the EPA's renovation, repair, and painting certifications when they perform work. In addition, the lead safety ordinance requires all city licensed contractors performing permitted work in the private market to also obtain the EPA renovation, repair, and painting certification, which PLI began enforcing this May 2022. We also partnered with Women for a Healthy Environment, a nonprofit organization, to provide these trainings to general contractors so they can get certified and understand and employ lead-safe construction practices. Another initiative, deconstruction, has been in the works for the last few months. Deconstruction is a demolition process where you take out the elements of a structure in the opposite order that they were installed with the intent of recycling and reusing the elements. We know that construction debris take up a lot of landfill space, and deconstruction is an approach that can have a positive environmental impact. In 2021, City Council passed legislation allowing PLI to perform a pilot program with Construction Junction to complete deconstruction demolitions on city-owned properties. Since then, we've performed site visits with Construction Junction. We've identified 12 viable candidates that have good materials for reuse and trained our demolition contractors this past April on how to perform a deconstruction demolition. So we're looking forward to reporting out more on a few deconstruction demolitions this late summer and fall after they're completed. With that, that is the end of my slide. I will pass it back to David and/or Andrew Dash.
Yeah, one of my greatest regrets in life, I was in Construction Junction maybe 10 years ago, and they had old bowling lanes that could have been cut into countertops, but I wasn't ready to do a reno then. And to this day, I still wish I could go back in time and buy those bowling lanes. Would have made my kitchen a lot more fun. Before we pass to Director Abrams, or Deputy Director Dash, I just want to reiterate, we're trying to do this in a little bit of an order. So if you think about the life cycle of a project, Whitney's team is in charge of kind of determining if a project is eligible. So let's say it's a demolition. They'll work with us to do the funding on the front end. Director Kinter's team will do the remediation of the demolition of condemned building. City planning really sets the table for what the future of that site's going to be. They're the ones doing a lot of the zoning work. They're doing the community plans that help guide us in what's next for that phase of property. But we'll get into more of that just now. So take it away.
Thanks, Dave. As Dave noted, my name is Andrew Dash. I'm the Deputy Director here for the Department of City Planning. As Sarah and Dave both alluded to, the Department of City Planning, really our job is around land use and development. And so that happens through things like, similar to Sarah and her team, work around reviews of projects as they are coming in. But really what we'll talk about a little bit more in this is, the work of plans that we create and how those affect and create opportunities for capital budget projects and capital budget requests. So those policies and projects that we really work on happen at a number of different scales. And so those happen anywhere from, from citywide policy, where we're looking at the city as a whole relative to a topic such as housing or land use. We do neighborhood or district level planning. So the Eco Innovation District is shown here, but have done neighborhood plans in a number of other communities. Happens in changes that we make to our zoning regulations, and in some cases, actual implementation. Although, places like our Public Art and Civic Design Division do implementation in the public realm. A lot of our work is really leading to folks like our Redevelopment Authority, our Department of Public Works, our Department of Mobility and Infrastructure to be implementing development projects that the city is leading. The one aspect of that is neighborhood planning, and like I said, we have completed neighborhood plans in 4 areas of the city, in the Manchester and Chateau neighborhoods, in Uptown, in Hazelwood, and in Homewood. And actually next Tuesday are taking to the Planning Commission a completed plan for the Oakland neighborhoods, and are presently working in the Hill District as well. And these neighborhood plans are really 10-year visions for those specific neighborhoods that then identify policy changes or zoning changes that the Department of City Planning may make, but also improvements to the neighborhoods that may be led by other agencies or other nonprofits or private actors. Other places where the capital budget funds some of the planning work that we do is around the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. And so the Americans with Disabilities Act coordinator is within the Department of City Planning. And some of the things like the interpretive services that are here tonight, and here is a number of our meetings, do come in from the capital budget through the Department of City Planning. In addition, the department's work around the Americans with Disabilities Act is also to do what's called transition planning, and that is really trying to identify the gaps in service or in our infrastructure that are not that need improvements to be made accessible, and then creating a plan for the city to make those facilities accessible. Another place where, as the Urban Redevelopment Authority will talk about its role in, in funding of housing, the Department of City Planning, works on policy around housing. And so that is really understanding the housing market and the housing needs that we have as a city, and then defining policies such as inclusionary zoning or other policy changes that we need to make to be able to really try to affect the production of housing, but mostly around the production of affordable housing here for the city of Pittsburgh. Another place where the capital budget touches the Department of City Planning is around our Public Art and Civic Design Division. And so, really a portion of their work is around the creation and maintenance of the artworks that we have here in the city of Pittsburgh. And so, that is the public art, the monuments, the memorials that we see throughout our city, that we do have to have a plan for and continue to maintain those. But also whether it's temporary artworks, such you see as on the screen, as things like intersection improvements, to new permanent artworks, such as the Art and Parks program, where we are developing new works of art in all of our regional parks, that those are funded through capital budget. One more, and this leads into the discussion that will occur tomorrow night, is that another place where there's capital budget that goes to the Department of City Planning is around environmental planning and our work in environmental planning. And part of that is, is master planning for the city's park system and some of our green spaces. And so tomorrow night, and this will be my push to, to continue the discussion with us. The way that, that the Department of City Planning gets funding to do these park master plans then leads into a lot of the things that will be discussed tomorrow night by the Department of Parks and Recreation, City Parks, and by our Department of Public Works as to then the things that they are building in our open spaces. So even though, like Dave said, there are a lot of places where the Department of City Planning is not necessarily the one receiving capital budget funding to create projects, but to create planning, just wanted to note as to how, what the process is typically as to how some of these capital projects that we have, as well as some of the plans that we do then affect the opportunity for other agencies to receive capital budget. So, just an example of the way in which that's done. The Department of City Planning really works with communities to develop plans. And, one example in this case is the Eco Innovation District, which is a neighborhood plan in the Uptown and West Oakland neighborhoods. And so in that case, we did work with those communities to develop the neighborhood plan. And that plan includes projects, programs, and policy that's based on vision for the, that was created by the community. So what, when those plans are done, then, as we work with neighborhoods around the idea of implementation, we really work to do more detailed studies. And so, that is really to create that, to have that vision that was created by the community in tandem with us, to then start to lead into more definitive action. And so that could be us in the Uptown example, creating trail plans over some of the areas of hillside where there was a desire for more open space. Or it could be, as the image on the top shows, actually looking at ways that certain properties that were really important to the community could be developed. And that site on the top was actually a project done as a part of the neighborhood plan that then led to work that the URA then brought a developer on board, and it is now a project that is beginning construction at the intersection of 5th and Dinwiddie Street. And then, in addition to that, like I said, with public art or with other things, there are items where then that capital budget dollars actually go, either to the Department of Public Works or to the Department of City Planning to actually be building public improvements, on our public spaces and in our public rights of way that come from these plans. Obviously, a lot of the planning work you can find through us on social media, as well as through the city's website for the Department of City Planning. So thank you.
So before we pass to David Geiger with the Urban Redevelopment Authority, I do want to highlight, to Andrew's point, one of the scoring categories for our formal recommendations to the mayor on the capital budget is how well does this proposal adhere to adopted plans? And so that comes in a few different formats. We may get, like, the Manchester neighborhood plan may get finished, and then the next year the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure may submit a project for traffic calming. We can go into that neighborhood plan and look and see that this is a formal recommendation from that neighborhood plan, and that project will score well. We also utilize kind of system-wide plans, both from city planning and outside partners. So we use the open space plan all the time. I think it's about 9 years old now. Still really useful in terms of a lot of the kind of envelope-wide recommendations that city planning has made. We also reference PwC's Green First plan. There's a lot of different things we try to look into to make sure that what's going into the capital budget is reflective of a community process. David, are you comfortable sharing your screen?
Yep, I'll pull that up right now, and I think Tom Link is going to lead off the presentation for the URA.
Excellent.
Yeah, thanks so much, David and David. My name's Tom Link. I'm a Chief Strategy Officer at the Urban Redevelopment Authority. On behalf of our Executive Director, Greg Flisserum, and our Board of Directors, happy to be here tonight and talk about the URA, and certainly excited to answer as many questions as we can and get feedback from everyone here as to what we do and what we're up to and how we think about our capital budget request. So the first line is our mission statement. I'll just read it. We exist to support the city of Pittsburgh's economic development goals, which are designed to create a city of inclusive opportunity for residents, stakeholders, and communities. For me, when I read this, and I always think of this just in terms of our work, the URA really exists to work on behalf of the city of Pittsburgh. And I think, for me, when we think about the city of Pittsburgh, we think about all of the city of Pittsburgh, right? The taxpayers, our residents, our small business owners, anyone who's living here, working here, paying taxes, making Pittsburgh their home. That's who we're working on behalf of, and all of our work is meant to meet that, and our mission statement is meant to reflect that. You can go to the next slide, David. Thanks. These are our priorities. These are priorities that we believe we share at the city of Pittsburgh. A large part, I think, as many folks know, it's a core element of our work is creating more housing, specifically affordable housing for the average Pittsburgher, encouraging entrepreneurship and small business development. A lot of our work goes to helping businesses to start, to grow, to create quality jobs and create great business districts here in our city. Quality job creation, through that work to support small businesses and business growth. That those jobs that we create through that activity are jobs that are, that are quality jobs that folks can get that will sustain one's life and have quality jobs and make sure they're available to everyone, and especially our neighbors, those of us who live here in our communities and our city, and make sure that the types of jobs that we're creating. Certainly improving our neighborhood development business districts, our main streets, a tremendous amount of work to invest directly in business districts and support of our business district partners to make great neighborhood business districts, and kind of building on the quality job creation is to ensure that the work that we're doing is creating a talented workforce through all of this work. Go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So generally speaking, I think you can categorize our work into two specific places. I think place-based, many folks will think of, come to mind when you think of the URA, you're thinking of, the Urban Redevelopment Authority and real estate development. A lot of our work is in community development, buildings, right? Bricks and mortar, real estate, housing development, place-based development, our business district development, certainly a core vertical of the work that we do. Additionally, and sometimes I wonder if this doesn't quite get as much play generally, but a significant bulk of and commitment of the work that we do is people-based. And when we say people-based, your direct investments in those activities which help people. So it's in our, largely in our business lending and investment portfolios, where we help businesses to start, to grow, to expand here in our city, which do multiple things. One, to help with job creation, help with creation of quality of life within our city, as well as for the entrepreneurs themselves to build wealth and to really sustain that and reinvest in our neighborhoods. And certainly on the home buyer side is a significant portion of the work we do to help folks buy homes. And that's a major part of our activity. But generally speaking, these are the primary places in which the URA works and the activity that we're involved in. You can go to the next slide, please. With that, we have a handful of folks here from the URA who are going to support me, which is really important. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Evan Miller, who's, really leads all of our housing efforts, to talk a bit about our work in developing affordable housing. So Evan, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Good evening, everyone. My name's Evan Miller, and I'm the acting director of housing lending here at the URA. And our department creates and preserves housing opportunities for Pittsburghers from all walks of life, whether they're renters, existing homeowners, aspiring homeowners, or really anywhere in between. And in order to provide these housing opportunities, we operate a handful of programs, and we utilize federal, state, and local funding sources to do so. And so we can go to the next slide. And so specifically as it relates to the community and economic development section of the capital budget, we're able to see here what affordable housing activities were funded in 2022 and how they were funded. So in 2022, a little over $1 million of home and CDBG funds were dedicated towards affordable and workforce for sale housing. And these funds, they got deployed or get deployed by the URA by partnering with community development corporations, nonprofit developers, and sometimes for-profit developers that are interested in creating affordable for sale housing. And these home and CDBG funds typically go into these projects as grants that they'll bridge the gap basically between the total development costs to bring this affordable for sale unit to market, and then what the appropriate affordable sales price is for the targeted income range. And then in exchange, there's long-term affordability deed restrictions that are recorded on the properties that these funds supported, ensuring that the affordable homeownership opportunity is passed on to future buyers as well. And then similarly, in 2022, about $3.3 million of home and CDBG were budgeted for affordable and workforce rental development. And these funds get utilized by the URA when we provide loans to developments that are delivering projects that have a significant component of affordability. And oftentimes, because these projects have lower rents than if they were solely market rate, they have less cash flow, and then they're not able to borrow maybe the full amount of money that they would need to from a traditional bank. And a gap lender like the URA using home or CDBG funds is required in order to deliver the project. So we'll provide a loan with these funds, and then in exchange require long-term affordability for a certain number of units in that project. So if we could go to the next slide. Generally speaking, all of these programs seek to ensure that the households that are served are, no matter what their income is, they aren't spending more than 30% of it on housing expenses. But when we do talk about affordable housing, this is typically aimed at assisting lower income households that are at or below 60% of the area median income for renters, and households that are at or below 80% of the area median income for home buyers. People that we often see benefiting from these affordable housing initiatives, they might work in retail, healthcare support, office administration, and maybe even the transportation field. So, and then if we could go to the next slide, when we refer to workforce housing, this typically refers to housing opportunities for middle income households that are between 60 and 80% for renters, 60 and 80% of area median income for renters, and between 80 and 120% of the area median income for sale units and opportunities. And the beneficiaries of workforce housing often include people in the professions of law enforcement, firefighters, teachers, nurses, and other skilled laborers as well. So that's a really quick overview of how the URA utilizes some of its capital budget allocation on an annual basis, but I'm going to hand it back off to Tom, I believe, to talk a little bit about small business development.
Yeah, thanks so much, Evan. Yeah, and you can, thanks so much for that overview. The other leg that we'll talk about a bit here is, our work to support entrepreneurs and small businesses. And you can go to the next slide, please. Thanks. So similar to, Evan described in the housing side, again, grateful to the city and to its investment in our work. But these are the dollars that we received, in the most recent capital budget cycle to support the work that we do. The takeaway here is that the dollars we receive on a capital budget from the city of Pittsburgh, we use to make our deepest investments in, again, supporting small business startup expansion and investments in our communities. The Neighborhood Initiatives Fund is direct investments in neighborhood-led and community-led placemaking development projects. And I know Gisette will speak a little bit later about NIF. We provide direct technical assistance to small businesses. We also provide direct assistance to emerging developers through our Equitable Empowerment Program to help folks, get involved in and engage in development of real estate in their communities and provide the right wraparound services for that. We provide dollars direct to small businesses through a variety of programs, including lending and investment, as well as facade improvement programs. Again, direct investment in neighborhood business district work, which I'll leave Josette to talk about in a minute here. Another tool that we received monies for last year is, the URA owns property similar to the city that we have to maintain. A program and a tool that we've advanced that we're really proud of is our land care program, where we've taken this portfolio of work to maintain the land that we owned and work to ensure that those contracts and that money goes directly to small businesses and local neighborhood contractors to ensure that they're the ones benefiting from the money spent to maintain a lot in one's neighborhood is to the best extent possible is going to someone who is in that community can benefit from that. So that's our land care program, where it's sort of a combination of maintenance of our land, but also supporting entrepreneurs and supporting workforce development in our community. And the last one is actually a bit new, but we're engaging in working to support employee-owned businesses. So last year, we're thankful again to the city for their investment and some monies to support support employee-owned businesses. So both the opportunities for employees to buy businesses, where they may work for business and the owners selling their business, and others, and help capitalize those opportunities. So it's a new line item last year, but we're thankful for that as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. The entrepreneurs we help. I mean, honestly, it's your neighbors. Most folks, if you walk in your business district, if you walk anywhere in our city, to shop, to buy to eat, to get a cupcake, to buy baked good, very often we've supported many of these small businesses, and it's across a wide variety of industries and across the city of Pittsburgh, the folks that we help. But what we want to make sure that folks are aware of, these are people, these are our neighbors. Yes, it's an individual business with a storefront and bricks and mortar, but ultimately who we're supporting are those who work every day to run these businesses, to build wealth for themselves, build great opportunities for their neighborhood, and employ folks. And these are the people that we're helping. You can go to the next slide, please. Thanks. I'm speaking, but I know Jennifer's here, and really credit to Jennifer and Jennifer's team. But a significant bulk of our work is direct investment in small businesses. We have a variety of tools that we operate, and we can engage individually with a business or an entrepreneur in what program makes sense for them. But we have programs that make direct investments, largely through loan programs, direct to small businesses, right? To start your business, to grow your business, to secure working capital, equipment, facade improvements, and other expenses. It's a core programs that we run in support of small businesses, and it's a lot of what we do, and specifically engage with our community to ensure that this capital is available to help folks grow their business and start their business here in the city. With that, I'm going to turn it over to one of my other colleagues, Gisette. If you're there, you can talk a bit about some of these specific tools that we have and programs that we've supported with previous capital dollars. I'd appreciate that.
Hi, everybody. I am Josette Fitzgibbons. I'm the Neighborhood Business District Manager for the Urban Redevelopment Authority. And I'm going to talk about a few things. The first is the URA has some programs. We have some programs that we work with that we call our partnership programs, where we support the work that other organizations do. And one of actually my favorite projects that I get to work on is working with the folks from Catapult Greater Pittsburgh on their entrepreneurship programs. Their initial program, kind of their catalyst program, I guess, was their Startup to Storefront, which started in 2018. It's a 12-month business incubation program that works with minority and women-owned businesses to give them mentorship as well as incubation, and really helps us to reduce the barriers to access to capital and business growth for them. They get mentoring, they get seminars, they work together, and they really get everything you need to become a successful entrepreneur. Since April of 2018, we've supported 75 minority and women-owned small businesses in 4 cohorts in the Startup to Storefront program. Part of the Startup to Storefront, or maybe the next step of the Startup to Storefront program, is the Catapult galleries. There are now 2. There's the gallery on Penn and the gallery on Center. The Catapult retail gallery incubators are storefront spaces where the Startup to Storefront businesses can have access to space to sell their products, to learn about selling their products, learn about being an everyday entrepreneur, and work within the communities. The gallery on Penn is on Penn Avenue in East Liberty, and the gallery on Center just opened about a month ago on Center Avenue in the Hill District. The next slide, please. So two more programs that have been added within the last year to the Catapult entrepreneurship programs, Catapult Culinary, which again, these are targeted to minority and women-owned businesses. In July, 15 entrepreneurs will be graduated from the first 12-month cohort. These are specifically food-based businesses and that really couldn't be served in the Startup to Storefront program. And these participants learn about running a food business, including all of those things you need to know about making food safely, which, you know, sometimes folks think that they know how to make their product, but following the regulations is a big part of it. And they have access to the commercial kitchen space through Allegheny Health Networks. They've been working with other partners like Giant Eagle to have product placement in local food stores, and then working at what's the next step for them. Do they want to do catering? Do they want to be a food truck? Do they want to actually go into a restaurant? The second cohort will begin probably in the fourth quarter of 2022. And the last of their programs is Catapult Kids, which was launched about a year ago. And it's a 6-month program for minority youth ages 12 to 17. They graduated 6 participants in 2021. Right now there are 10 youth entrepreneurs are scheduled to start this month in the 2022 cohort. And these are kids that have actual businesses and actual products. And they're amazing. It's an amazing program. Next slide, please. So, and in looking at working with our entrepreneurs within our department, which is business solutions, we really look at what's the other stuff we can do for entrepreneurs besides the financing or in partnership with our lending department. The first is another partnership program, Get Online, Grow Online, that we started in partnership with Neighborhood Allies back in the spring of 2020, when businesses weren't, particularly food businesses, but retail businesses as well, weren't open, and we're pivoting to online, online sales, beefing up their websites, trying to get away from having to do DoorDash and things like that. And so this program matches small businesses with e-commerce technical assistance providers to help establish or expand their online presence. And the program, which through Neighborhood Allies has expanded to be actually throughout Western Pennsylvania now, not just the city of Pittsburgh. To date, about 150, a little more than 150 businesses have been served. Nearly 90% of the businesses that we serve through this program are minority and or women owned. We also do some other work. We do a lot of business education webinars. We were really through 2020 and 2021, we were very much doing a webinar a month to help small businesses. But our topics over the last year or so have included how to apply for a URA loan, how to access other programs like the Enterprise Zone Tax Credit or the PA Small Business Grant Program, or helping businesses figure out if they're ready to move into a space, what it takes to go from having your at-home online business into a physical space. We also have our Avenues of Hope Storefront Facade Program, which is a $12,000 grant program where we just ask for a 10% match from the applicant. It is available in our Avenues of Hope corridors, which Aster will describe in more detail in a few minutes. To date, this year, we have awarded 8 grants, and there are several more in the pipeline. And we do networking and technical assistance for our business district groups. We do any folks that are involved in working within their commercial corridors every other Thursday morning, we have virtual networking meetings where we do announcements. We talk about activities that are happening, and mostly the groups can talk about what they're doing and work with each other. We do a lot of informational webinars with our organizations and topic-specific meetings. And right now we're working on a business district needs survey that will culminate in a town hall meeting for our groups to look at how the URA is serving our business districts and the entrepreneurs within the business districts, and how we can help those organizations do their work a little bit better. Next slide, please. The key to the work that I do and that my team does at the URA is working in our neighborhood business districts, revitalizing, promoting growth, promoting job creation, making our commercial corridors better places for our neighborhoods, for folks in Pittsburgh, and for the businesses themselves. Next slide. One of the programs that we do that's a very popular program that encourages investment in our commercial corridors is our Neighborhood Initiatives Fund program. It provides grants of up to $100,000 to community organizations for projects primarily in our neighborhood commercial corridors that promote economic development. The focus again is on our business districts and its placemaking projects. It's public space. It's fixing doing something in an anchor building in the business district. It's doing physical improvements to help a program that serves the whole community. Since 2019, we have granted awards to 27 projects in more than 20 city neighborhoods, and the total investment's been about $2 million. Now, along with that, I say that most of the grants that we give through the NIF program require a match of 1/3, basically. For every $2 of URA funds, there's $1 is required from the organization that's applying. So that $2 million really leverages into quite a lot more money invested. And a lot of times the projects that we're investing in are a little bit larger even. So these are really key projects within our neighborhoods. The applications for the 2022 round just closed a few weeks ago. This year we received 41 applications. Those of you, some of the folks on this meeting have been in our review committee too, and know how difficult it's been to get through all of the really great applications. We're funding up to 10 projects, and our total budget is up to $500,000. So it's a hard decision. If any of you out there are waiting to hear from us, it'll be a little bit longer, but we got a lot of good applications this year, and we look forward to 2023. The spring of 23, the next application round will be open. Next slide. And I think it's back to you, Tom, or no, to Austere.
Great, thank you, Josette. So I'll be explaining the Avenues of Hope program. I'm the project manager for this initiative. And for those who are unaware, Avenues of Hope is essentially a holistic model for rebuilding Pittsburgh's Black business districts. Back in about 2021, there was a document introduced into council titled Black Communities Matters. And part of that white paper, there were multiple recommendations, one of which was this concept called Avenues of Hope. It's a place-based, people-first approach that intervenes across all layers of successful, healthy, and sustainable Main Street development. And you will see that there's a focus on 7 major business corridors, one is disparate throughout the city of Pittsburgh, and are geographically spaced out, and each represent a community that's been, quite frankly, disinvested or lack of investment with a majority African-American population. Our goal is to invest in existing small businesses and residents using current URA products but also we've been able to create specific Avenue of Hope programs to further support this initiative. Next slide. So on the map, you can see the 7 various districts. And if you actually go on the website, on our URA website, you can actually click on any of the corridors and see an interactive map to see all the various investments. But this is just kind of an example and to show you where the corridors are located. On your screen, you can see they're numbered 1 through 7. And just to quickly go through them, Perrysville Avenue. So it's Perrysville North and South at the corner of Charles. So you can see it's kind of broken up as the top 1 and 1. Chartiers Avenue. It does say Sheridan, but it's actually the entire 3-mile stretch of Chartiers Avenue. So it goes across multiple neighborhoods within that one corridor. It's the longest corridor within the 7 as well. Of course, Center Avenue in the Hill District, Marmor Avenue, Homewood Avenue, Warrington Avenue, and if you, which includes Allentown and parts of Beltuvor, and then of course, 2nd Avenue, also known as Irvine Street. Next slide. And you're probably wondering what makes Avenue of Hope different than, the current work that the URA is doing. Well, we're really taking a holistic and sustained engagement approach. So we've kind of built these pillars based upon our original Center Avenue RFP process back in 2019 and learned from those lessons and took that to create a process that is inclusive and as like we often say, engage early and often. So we're thinking about community specific transformation. We understand what's happening in Sheridan is different than what's, may work in Irvine Street. And we understand that the community needs and values in one corridor may be different in another. So we understand that we have to do specific planning and avenue transformation at the corridor level. We look at strategic site assemblage, ongoing business and social support services. So we have comprehensive technical assistance, both from a business standpoint and from a development standpoint. So if, in one of our corridors, we have a business owner, a property owner who wants to work on a project or sees potential, but they don't have that technical skill for development, we provide that as well. We found that was an important piece in providing equitable development processes and access in these corridors. We also are taking a large interest in housing, small business support, and augmented community service. So if you look at the past the presentation moving forward, you notice that all of these services that, Evan, Tom, Josette explained, they all come together and intervene strategically in these avenues of hope. So we utilize strategically all the programs that we have at the URA, but also develop specific programs that are just for Avenue of Hope programs so that we can do strategic interventions. We do have some things coming down the pipeline and certain projects that are available today, but this is just a brief overview of the overall environment and climate of what Avenue of Hope is. Next slide. And I will hand it off to Tom.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sarah, and thanks so much to all of my colleagues at the URA. This is a slide actually that is duplicate, I think, of a slide earlier in the city's. David or Whitney, you may have mentioned this in your slides, is kind of what the mayor's priorities are moving forward and what we'll be thinking about as we consider it a ask to the city through the capital budget process. So I will leave this here for a minute, but not read it or repeat it. So thanks for that. And then you can go to the next slide, please. Just really briefly how to connect with us. You can engage with us in many different ways through various, social media, our website. You can go to our website, read our newsletter. You can go to the next slide, please. And other ways to stay connected is to receive updates. You can sign up to receive email alerts through the URA, and those are just some examples of the way we try to stay connected. And I believe that's the end of our presentation. And I thank you for listening, and thanks so much for your investment in the URA over many years. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for presenting. I'm always impressed at the wide breadth of projects and services the URA offers. It seems like y'all are constantly innovating and coming up with new ways to serve residents. So glad you're able to join us tonight. We're going to start the question and answer. I would like to start, Alex, if you can unmute Pastor Love and see if there are any questions there first. I want to check in and make sure. If not, we can move on to some written questions. Pastor Love.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Praise the Lord, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I ask a couple of questions on the Avenue of Hope programs. Is there going to be a community committee to decide what projects are to be funded with the funds from the Avenue of Hope? And the other issue I would like to ask about is the city properties. The vacant city properties, not the vacant lots, but the properties that have city-owned houses on it. What fund is available to make these properties safe? We talked about this for years, having vacant properties owned by the city where they're not boarded up, the land is not being taken care of, sidewalks are broken, and they're the most dangerous properties in the community. But at the same time, the city is finding private homeowners for the same conditions that their properties in. Thank you.
Yeah, do we want to start maybe with the second question in terms of funding for city property? Tom or Director Pollock, I don't know if you have any direct thoughts on that one first.
Sure, I can take that part first. And thank you, Pastor Love. I think it's a great question. So I'm very excited to note that beginning this year, 2022, the city has adopted a land care program very similar to the one that the folks at the URA mentioned earlier, where rather than relying on a single citywide contractor or our own in-house crews exclusively to do maintenance on lots that have become overgrown, we're again using the same strategies as the URA has in contracting with small neighborhood-based businesses to do that work. And we've seen pretty positive results so far. We're only, what is it? It's now the beginning of June. So I think it's probably 5-6 weeks since the program started. So that they haven't been everywhere yet. And we're still working out some of the kinks. But already we've gotten a lot of positive response from community organizations where there are large concentrations of city-owned lots that we're doing more effective maintenance. And I realize that's only one small piece of your question, but I think it's an important first step that we've been taking in the last month or so to do better with our own maintenance obligations as it relates to overgrowth and things of that nature. In terms of the boarding up, or I guess just the appropriate remedial measures on a vacant property prior to looking to sell it for rehabilitation. That's a more complicated question. Again, I think it's an area where we're getting better and more responsive. A big portion of that work is done by the Department of Public Works. They're not here with us tonight, but I believe they will be presenting on tomorrow night's call. So we might be able to get some further information from them on that call, or at that meeting, excuse me. But I'll also note that the Department of Permits, Licenses, and Inspections has a role to play in that step. So Director Kinter, if you want to speak to just sort of how we prioritize those board ups, I think that could be helpful.
Sure. Thanks, Director Pollock. And thank you, Pastor Love. That's a great question. So when a 311 complaint comes in about a vacant city-owned property, PLI does issue citations, ensures that our finance team and DPW team know what property maintenance violations exist on city-owned properties. We do work with DPW to request board up of those properties. We're trying to firm up that process so that it's faster and more proactive, and we're not relying on complaints from residents about board ups. But we do get some really great information from residents. Sometimes we board a property up and there's unauthorized occupants that remove those boards to use that structure. And so we're also working with the Office of Community Health and Safety to interface with folks that are using abandoned structures to make sure that they can get connected to assistance as well. So those are, sort of two prongs that we work on when we get complaints and 311s about vacant structures that are city owned that need to be boarded up.
Thanks, Director. And I guess the last piece that I would note to your question, Pastor Love, about the ultimate sort of preservation or rehabilitation of those properties. That is and will remain to be a difficult, probably the most complicated challenge in this process. The most effective way, I think, that we can do that is by accelerating the process by which we take what has become a city-owned property, which typically means that it is vacant, abandoned, and in tax foreclosure, and clear up not just the physical on-site issues with the property, but also the legal complications behind its ownership. In city government and in the business, we call that tangled title. But really, what that means is that the ownership is somewhat complicated by the fact that the previous owner walked away from it, and then we took it through the tax foreclosure process, but that ownership isn't clearly established. That's why you've heard folks in city government talking for many years about making our land bank a functional part of this toolkit, and we are taking aggressive steps forward on that this year. I realize that folks will rightly want to see the proof of our work before they believe that, because it's been a long time in coming. But being able to do that will make it much easier for us to effectively get a property into the hands of someone, be that a private individual or a community group or CDC that wants to rehabilitate it before its condition deteriorates to the point that it can't be it can't be preserved, and typically it would have to be demolished. So we're taking some steps in that direction right now as well. It's part of the city's allocation of our American Rescue Plan dollars. We have invested some, or we're in the process of transferring some resources to the URA to run a housing preservation program that might be able to tackle some of these issues in concert with some of these other entities. Most of the focus of that program will be on other forms of affordable housing preservation, but there may be instances as we get the land bank up and running that those dollars could be deployed in cases like this as well. So it's definitely a very important task for us, but we're certainly putting the first pieces of it together right now in improving our property maintenance through the land care program.
Yeah, I think one of the really interesting innovations with the land care program too is that it seemed to be a great low barrier opportunity for people to start small businesses as well. They did some really interesting stuff in terms of using mobile devices for invoicing to do pictures, and I think it's created some great new smaller businesses in Pittsburgh. So the first question, I don't know if Sarah or Tom, you want to talk about project selection for Avenues of Hope?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that very much, and it's a great question, and thank you, Mr. Love, for the question. I think if you're referring to the monies that were, excited and hopeful to receive as the direct support of the individual Avenues of Hope, the answer is yes. We will plan, review processes that include community leadership and community participation to help advise and drive direction of those resources to asks and requests and projects that are seeking those funds. I would say, generally speaking, and I would include Avenues of Hope tools as well as all of our tools really, do go through various sort of oversight and public input before making final decisions, and namely before making any final investment decisions for the most part. And certainly at our board of directors level to ensure there's plenty of opportunities for public input and community input on the investments we make. Just thinking about the neighborhood initiatives fund that Josette described so well. We do have a variety of committees that are with community input to ensure that we're making sound community investment decisions, and of course ultimately at the visibility at our public board meetings to make sure that to ensure to the best extent possible that there is that input and oversight from neighborhoods and community partners as to those investments. But specific to your question on the Avenues of Hope, I believe you're referring to the monies that we're hopeful to receive that specifically invest in each individual avenue. Yes, there will be a processes set up that provide tailored sort of community input as to the investment of those dollars. So thank you for that question.
Okay, hopefully that was a good answer. Working through some of the written questions, we had one on if a project with ongoing costs like maintenance or staff makes it through the capital budget approval process, does that obligate its inclusion in future operating budgets perpetually? Or is it a separate budgeting process to ensure the project exists perpetually? If it is separate, who makes that sort of decision, through what process? So Deputy Director Cornell gave a great response. The answer is yes, it does obligate us. So that's part of why in the capital budget proposal form, we're asking that question of what will be the operating budget impact of this capital project. So that allows us to communicate between the two teams, the capital team and the operating team, to say, hey, we want to hire on the operating side, maybe we want to hire 10 new laborers. They'll tell the capital team, we need to buy 5 new trucks. So that's part of the coordination that we try to work our way through as we're developing 2 budgets separately, but also together at the same time. I'm going to pass the next one to Director Kinter, who started to answer, but there was a really good follow-up question from Lisa. When the city demolishes a privately owned building, is that cost then recouped from the property owner? If not, why not? That money could be put back in to fund another demolition. And I don't know if you want to talk about the tingle title process that was referenced earlier, some of the many complications you have in your job. I always give it to PLI. They have really complicated work and they manage to weave their way through a lot of regulations.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Lisa, for the question. So in terms of the demolition after it's performed, we do lien the cost of that demolition against the property. But as I noted in my response, oftentimes the owner is deceased and there's no responsible agent to repay the costs. And that's part of the reason why it was demolished. It was not in a state of good repair and deteriorated over time. It's an indication of a lack of investment and a lack of upkeep on the structure. And then Lisa asked a good follow-up question. If the property owner is deceased and it's not willed to a responsible person, is it sold and are the costs of the demolition recouped at that point, I think is the question there. Lisa, feel free to jump in and let me know if I interpret that appropriately, that first part. We do receive those costs back for the demolition that was liened against the property. It weaves its way eventually to PLI. If the property is sold, or I shouldn't say PLI, sorry, to the general coffers if the property is sold. But I think it's important to note that the cost of the demolition can be a lien or can be a barrier to purchasing that property for some buyers. And most condemned buildings are single and 2-family structures, and the ones that we demolish are single and 2-family structures left over from a shrinking population. So it's you ask here, is it a legal or a legislative issue? We talked a little bit about the land bank, and I think that's helpful. That's a helpful tool that we're looking to get online. It's also a market issue, right? Enticing buyers to take condemned properties. Certainly, we would love to see our condemned property list shrink, but it is a challenge.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know if Director Pollack or Kyle want to jump back in to talk about the land bank. Donna had a great question. Years ago, the city had a great house sale allowing residents to purchase and rehab and live in for at least 5 years. Has the city thought about this? Also selling to organizations at a low cost. I will say some of the work that Whitney's team does for the Neighborhood Economic Development Grant, some of those funds are going directly to CDCs who do that kind of land recycling. But that's on more of a spot basis. Different different community development corporations have different capacities, and some are great at that. Some focus on other services for residents. So that's more neighborhood by neighborhood, but there is a citywide program. Director Pollack, if you want to talk to that.
Actually, if Kyle, I'd love for you to take that one. That's good.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Donna. I know we had a chance to talk earlier today too. But yeah, I mean, both are great points. I think to what Deputy Mayor Pollack mentioned earlier in terms of work and what we're hoping to get started in actually getting the land bank launched, addressing sort of affordable home ownership, right? If I'm kind of looking at the underpinning of your question, is key, right? In the way in which we think about how to really leverage and utilize the land bank in addition to some of the other lanes on land recycling that, can be better served. So I think as we look about, and think about that, there's definite potential there as really a tool to unlock in order to facilitate those opportunities for home buyers to have, the properties that are within the city's portfolio as chances and opportunities for affordable home ownership, as well as partnership with community groups. So the property reserve that some of the community groups are used to, but really how do we kind of allow for that to work more effectively and efficiently than it historically has and presently does, is kind of foremost in the way that we're thinking about ways to increase opportunities for affordable home ownership. So thank you for that question, and we'll certainly be sure to engage community groups continually as we begin to design the way that process works.
Excellent. So there's another question. David, I think this one might be good for you. What is the fund sources for the URA's operating expenses?
Yeah, I'll kick that one over to Tom. It's various sources. I don't know, Tom, do you want to take a stab at this
Sure,
one?
I'll take it. Yeah, it's a great question. I think a couple of things maybe just for the public to know and for this forum to know. We do, and then last year, we again, due to the city, and we typically will ask the city to help invest in us to help cover our costs to support the monies that and the programs and projects that we invest in through the capital budget dollars. It's the extent the city is so gracious in investing in us. I believe last year, and David, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was the city invested $500,000, I believe, in our operating budget to help support overhead and staffing to administer these programs. It represents, roughly about 5 to 6% over our operating budget. So we're able to, what we do is use that money, again, graciously invested by the city into our work, and we supplement that with earned revenue. So, some of the work that the URA does, I mentioned loan programs and others, we're able to charge fees and interest rates and that type of thing. So we're able to generate earned revenue, which we can use to supplement our operating budget. This is specific to the city's capital budget, but the URA is also a conduit to many state and federal investment programs that flow to the city of Pittsburgh development. And, we're able to earn fees off of those. As an example, state redevelopment assistance capital project dollars, when coming to the city, flow through the URA. We're able to charge a fee on those grants that help supplement our admin budget. So we're able to cobble together, a variety of earned sources, as well as other grants from time to time to supplement, to build out our operating budget and to pay for this work. But, and again, we do ask the city to help with that, especially with the administration of these monies, to the extent that we're able to receive from the city. I would invite, I'm happy to have an offline conversation. I'm not an accountant, but our, audited financials are on the website, and folks can go to it. Not that I want to put and say, hey, go read our audit. But, I was actually just looking at it now when I saw the question. I think it's page like 16 or something on our most recent audit, that actually kind of gets into some specific detail on some of our earned revenues. But that's certainly welcome to. Certainly happy to answer those questions. That's an answer to that question. I hope that's helpful. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, you mean people don't just check out audited documents in their free time?
Well, in full disclosure, I didn't really until the question was asked. Well, let me go look at our audit and see what it says. But no, but they're all out there. So yeah, but appreciate that question.
I'll just add on the very end of that, Tom, for those that don't want to dive into the details of a financial audit, there is more of a general overview of this information in our annual reports as well, which are posted on the same page online. So if folks want to take a look at the annual report, learn more about our work, as well as some of our budget overview, that would also be a helpful document.
Yeah, thanks so much, David. Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a dirty little secret of a lot of city employees. A lot of our major tools and resources are publicly available. So we're looking up the same stuff you can look up as part of the public too. Dennis asked a great question. So Dennis works on Youth and Mentor Workforce Development Program. They said our office is located in East Liberty. After 12 years of enjoying a lease in one of the office complexes on Broad Street, their lease was terminated due to the corporate rate for square footage being significantly higher than what they were paying with less foot traffic. So Dennis's question is, does the URA have programs to support long-term community assets that are being rapidly displaced?
That's a great question. I appreciate asking. Probably the short answer is yes. The more convoluted answer is to talk individually with whatever the, I think in this particular case, to learn more about the, what the organization and what their needs are and space needs are and how we can assist. Between our, on the small businesses, programs that we have to support working capital and loans and these types of things that can help with, to help, with occupancy costs and lease payments, these types of things. On the development side, we certainly work to put together tools that can help, finance the places where, community entities will, operate and exist. So I know it's a bit of a nuanced answer. It's hard to fully answer without, getting into the details, which we're happy to do. If the person asking the question would like to reach out to us individually, we can certainly talk more deeply about the specifics and see how we can help. So yeah, I appreciate that. I don't know if anybody else in the URA team has something to add to that, but yeah, I do appreciate that question.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Just want to do one more check. If anybody has any questions, you can type them into the chat or do a hand raise if you'd like. Dennis will get you a contact if somebody from the URA would like to put in an email address that Dennis can utilize. That would be great. Also, I've got to shout out Donna. Donna's a champion of coming out to these public meetings and asking really interesting, nuanced questions, representing the neighborhood well. So thank you, Donna, for coming back out again. So we're going to close out with 4 short but hopefully impactful screens, some slides that are just going to give you some tools on how you can continue to be a part of this process. You have great options available to you, but first we want to talk about kind of what we do with the information you do provide us. So tonight you've provided some great questions. Those are part of our YouTube broadcast. We're actually live on YouTube right now, and we will be releasing a video in a few days once the INP team has a chance to edit everything together. Also, we will share any of your questions with both the departments, the city departments and the city council offices. We're going to talk about the survey in a little bit. Anything you share on the survey is also going to go to those 2 parties as well. They're the parties who submit the proposals for the capital budget. So we want to make sure that they're seeing your comments specifically and they can react to them for the 2023 capital budget. In regards to the survey, it's all on our Engage page. Again, thank you. Somebody else already did, but thank you to City Planning for championing Engage as an online portal. We've had really interesting success with this, being able to put everything we have kind of in one place. So when you're on the engagepittsburghpa.gov website, you can check out the 2023 City of Pittsburgh budgets. This is information for both the operating and capital budgets. So there's a bunch of tools on the right-hand side. You can sign up for tomorrow night's meeting on recreation and facility projects. Sorry, I'm going to blow this up a little bit. Recreation and facility projects, you can check out last year's budgets. There's also some really cool budget simulators that are fun to play with. We have our timeline in the bottom as well. So if you want to get an update on where we are in the process, that's a crucial place to do that. And then we have 2 surveys. We have both the operating and capital budget survey. The capital budget survey gets you some great detail. You can start off by just plopping a dot on the map. We can see all the ideas we already have for capital projects for 2023 that other residents have already put in. Feel free to add your marker with your idea for 2023. You can also type it out in a few different places. There's 3 slots for you to put in a description of the work that you want to see happen and also the location. Be as specific as you can with the location. That's going to help us route the request to the right council office. Down below, you can also tell us just kind of generally, what are you seeing in your neighborhood citywide, project-wise? What do you want to see in better condition? Do you want to see better sidewalks, or do you want to see safer streets or better infrastructure with the pools? You can kind of give us that asset class information at that section. And then you also have the opportunity to respond and read all of the mayor's 2023 capital budget priorities. So there's some great opportunities on our Engage page to learn more about the capital process, the upcoming operating budget meeting, and the survey for them as well. So let's talk about the survey. These are actual results from last year's survey. So the information on the white is what was input as survey responses, as ideas for capital projects. What happens in the yellow is kind of the value add that the Office of Management and Budget team does. So for each individual response we go through, we try to tag it with a relevant project. With that project, there's going to be a department that's attached to it. And if a good location is given, like Manchester in this case, we know that that's going to be District 6. We put all of the comments, all the project ideas on one spreadsheet. We send it out to all of the council offices, all of the city authorities and departments, and they have the opportunity to take the spreadsheet and filter it by what's relevant to them. So if they're a council office, they can search the service area column, filter that by District 6. Councilmember Lavelle can check out everything that people submitted for public comments for District 6 for 2023's capital budget. Same with the departments. Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, the Urban Redevelopment Authority, they can filter the results by their department and get a comprehensive list of all of the comments for the 2023 capital budget. We like to include these two graphs. For the right-hand side, there's 2022 survey responses in terms of the types of projects that people requested. The orange section is a lot of engineering and construction. So that's our facilities. That's a lot of the work the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure does in our streets and right-of-way. The blue section, I'm sorry, that's mostly DOMI, the infrastructure for our transportation is orange. The blue section is our facility improvement. So that'll be things, both buildings and also parks, playgrounds, those kind of outdoor facilities. On the left-hand side is how we actually allocated the 2022 capital budget funds. As you can see, there is some connection there. So we did spend a lot of money with DOMI, our Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. They got a big chunk of our 2022 capital budget funds. And we make sure that the facility improvement projects also got pretty well funded. There's some other slices in there that a lot of people, vehicles and equipment, it's not on top of mind for a lot of people. So it's understandable that it wasn't in the survey responses. But to our discussion earlier about balancing capital and operating, we need vehicles. We need our vehicles so that staff can go out and empty trash cans and do really important things for your day-to-day in the city. We're gonna close out. This is our last slide with just some additional resources. I always say 311 is your kind of first line of defense for capital needs. If you see something, you can always tweet at them at PGH311. There's also our website for the Office of Management and Budget. You can email us at cip@pittsburghpa.gov if you have any capital specific questions. We can help you out with that. Council office is always there for you. You have a council member for a reason. They're there to advocate for you. So never feel afraid to reach out to your council person with any capital budget requests. They have their own budget office. Also the survey, if you're somebody who's more into writing things out, writing down your ideas, that's a great resource for you too. And then we have out now Balancing Act, which is a kind of balanced budget simulator. It's a fun kind of gamified version of our jobs. That's out now with the 2022 budget loaded. So you can move the faders around, let us know what you want to see more or less of, provide comments through that. But we're really going to be revamping that in October when we have that space in between the preliminary mayor's budget and the final budget in November. We're going to use those 5 or 6 weeks to put the 2023 draft budget up, and you can all provide comments on that we can utilize to make the final version of the budget better. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, just do one more check, make sure I didn't miss any Q&A. Looks like we got everything. I want to say thank you to our neighborhood services team. Thank you to Innovation and Performance. Thank you to our 2 interpreters tonight. We literally could not do these meetings without them. Most importantly, I want to thank everybody who came out as a resident. It's really great to see people asking such interesting questions about our infrastructure, especially when it comes to things as important as economic development. So thanks to everybody. Hopefully we left enough time for everybody to watch the Warriors beat the Celtics tonight. If there's nothing else happening, I just want to say thanks again, and I hope everyone has a great night.